What's up, guys? Today we have another game analysis. We're going to analyze a game of Nick DeRue, rated 1661 in a 15-10 game. He has the black pieces. Let's see what happens. And he's up against Sundar's 1600. We get 1d4. How will he respond? Knight f6. Standard, typical response. Bishop f4. He could be playing the London. b6. Okay, this is fine. It's interesting. So this guy plays his knight out to c3, a Jobava London setup. It's kind of weird because black didn't play d5. So there's never anything like this. Any pressure on the c7 pawn, because you can always go d6 if you want. Or you could do a ton of other things, but it's just weird. Bishop b7, slicing along the long diagonal. I like this move. White goes e3. He's unable to go e4 because the square is covered by black. And he's ready to develop. Black should continue development. Let's see what he does. He goes e6, opening an avenue for his bishop. So I like this move. White goes knight to f3, developing a piece towards the center. Also a good move. Now white has some nicely developed minor pieces. Black needs to follow suit. So black develops his bishop out, pinning the knight, and getting ready to castle even before white. And in return, white has a pawn in the center. Black does not. Okay, this is a typical, it's like a Nimzo Indian maneuver to develop quickly and pin the knight. White goes a3, asking the bishop, are you really going to take the knight and give up a bishop pair? Nick says yes, and it's oftentimes given up for the knight in order to play against this double pawn structure. A lot of black openings, they trade to create this pawn, and then you try to attack them at some point. So the game's still even. It's doubled, but it's not like a terminal weakness or anything. It's just a potential target. But if that's all that's wrong with white's position, he'll be fine. Black needs to create something else wrong with the position. Okay, let's see what happens. Black castles, and now as you can see, he doesn't have a pawn in the center, but his position is still pretty fine. He's got a good knight, good bishop. He needs to get this guy out, though. I think it's important to get this knight out fast. So white just develops his last minor piece to its most natural square, defending and being defended by one of these doubled pawns, and protecting the e4 square in case he ever. He still can't push it, but either way, it's a nice bishop. And all of his minor pieces are developed. He's ready to castle. Now black finally goes d5, putting a pawn in the center, making sure that these two squares are controlled, that white will never be able to play e4. It does shut his bishop, but the bishop also x-rays through the pawn. So for example, if you put a knight on e4 and he takes and you take, the bishop is still x-raying through the pawn, so it always puts pressure. So that's kind of nice. What else? I wonder if white played h4, which I don't like. Doesn't really do anything. I mean, you can make that move later on after you've improved as much as you can and you're looking for, more improving moves. But I feel like castling is more natural. I feel like even a4 or c4 is more natural. How bad is c4? c4 run into bishop a6 maybe. Uh, I don't know. I might be tempted as white to go c4. Bishop a6, but you could just take. Yeah, I might have gone c4, but white didn't go c4. White went h4. I mean, let's say you go h5, and then you get another free turn, and you go h6. Now black's just gonna go g6, and what? And you're not breaking through. The rook is blocked, the bishop's blocked. You're gonna have to sack on g6 after you mount tons of pieces there. So I don't really know what h4 does. I don't like it. Now black immediately strikes back in the center with the c pawn, which is nice. He now finishes the structure, which you see a lot from the black side in lots of openings. He goes for this. He goes for knight development, queen somewhere, and then that's how he gets harmony in his position. So white insists on not developing, on forgetting his rooks, forgetting. Like if you play c4, that, which is why I wanted to do it earlier, it's an attempt at getting rid of this weakness. That way you have one c pawn, and then you can play c4 again, and then you can get rid of your weakness. But h4, h5 seems almost like the wrong priority. I feel like it's not losing. It's just I wouldn't play it in a tournament. Definitely not. It seems way too optimistic. H6. Let's see. So h6 is nice. I like this move. It's not necessary because again, if he goes here, you could just push, and these pawns should hold pretty nicely, I imagine. But that's not guaranteed. Let's see. Instead of h6, normally I don't like releasing the tension in the center and pushing c4, like let's say in a French. I always like having this pawn on pawn tension, but in this specific case, there's a pawn here, and I don't think there normally is a pawn there. So if you do push the c pawn and hit the bishop, it doesn't have this diagonal to retreat to, which is not usually the case. So in this case, you get to kick the bishop. He'll have to go here, and that will let you get in here for free, which attacks the pawn and this square. So it's actually indefensible, which is funny. So yeah, in that case, I do like c4 followed by knight e4. But if that didn't exist, I do like Nick's move of h6, stopping anything on the king side even. But again, I don't think it was 100% necessary. Now white plays c4. But now this is kind of a little too far, I feel like. This square is open for the pieces. But let's see what happens. It's kind of still pretty even. So black takes in the center, opening up his bishop, which I like, and also misdirecting this bishop away from the king's diagonal if it wants to recapture, which I'm sure he does. Okay, so that's a pretty decent decision. What else? If you take this way, you always have to consider the captures, right? So if we take this way, it's pretty natural to take back with the pawn. And then you could take this one, and you can leave him with an IQP. That's a strategy. Okay, but Nick takes this way, that's fine. Again, you can take here, but now he has, by doing it in this order, he has other options. For example, queen takes, right? Because the bishop was here before, he didn't have that option. And before, if he took with the knight, I was looking at setting up, you know, some type of forks, but now I feel like all that type of stuff is gone by using the move order where you take this pawn before you take this pawn. Because like here, you see the queen's nowhere coming, the bishop's blocking it. And so this creates this threat, so probably taking this pawn was slightly more accurate. But this is fine, and now black's bishop is open, so that's important. That's what's important in a practical game. So now he develops his last piece to its best square, because knight to c6 blocks your own bishop and walks into potential pawn pushes and bishop attacks. White removes his knight from the center and goes to h4, although this square is covered and this square is covered, and even if you sack the knight on g6 and I take you and you take me, I move away, and I don't think that's worth a piece, so I'm not sure. You also can't bring the queen in because it's covered, and there's no reason you'd want to make room for the f pawn. Or maybe f3 g4 is an idea, but really, this bishop, I don't like this move. It looks kind of, it's weird. I don't really understand it. You're opening up the diagonal, but then you're protecting it backwards with the move. It's like, why even bother? Just leave the knight there, right? Yeah, I don't like this move. So now black kind of has a free tempo. He can, you know, the first moves that catch my eye without calculating would be, let's say, rook c8. It comes with the immediate sneak attack of takes. It also develops the rook, so I do like rook c8. There's some knight jumps that are interesting. What else? Maybe you have b5. You hit the bishop. if the bishop takes, you have queen a5 check. So if you push this pawn and the bishop can't take, I don't know, let's say it goes back here. You can go a3, h4, c4, takes. Yeah, that's nice. You get a passer on the b file. So b5 is like a nice tactical move. Knight d5 and e4 are more positional, and rook c8 is positional. He goes knight d5, which threatens this and this. It's a pretty good knight. But white doesn't take it. Can you do this though? I feel like, you know, I get it, you don't want to give up your light square bishop because you don't want to leave black with the only one. But if you don't take this knight, that's a huge problem, right? He could just take your bishop, your dark square bishop, he can jump and invade. I don't know. I feel like he should take it. And if he doesn't take it, I feel like this is not the move. Because this walks into knight d f6. And then you don't have time for any tricks like bishop takes h6, which is maybe what he's hoping for. But knight df6 looks super strong because the queen has to move again. And then, just for example, you could take the bishop and plant the other knight in there. I like this for black for sure. But he doesn't do it. He doesn't. It looks so natural to put this knight here. I don't feel like that's such a hard move to find. I'm not against taking the bishop. But at the end of the day, it doesn't ruin his pawn structure. His queen gets to take back. It's not the end of the world for white. And if you're going to take the bishop, you might as well get this in for free. Because the queen has to move, and then you can take the bishop next, and your knight would have been on f6 instead of d7. So it's just a free move. It's like a free move. So you have to play it. You can't not play it. Okay, but he goes knight f4. Queen has to take, right? And now it's the same thing. He can develop knight f6. You know, he could put this in here again if he wants. I still like rook c8, getting that guy in the game, because this c file looks like it has targets, like it's kind of weak. And then you always have c takes d. White has problems he's trying to solve. Black doesn't have any problems because realistically this knight isn't doing anything. This rook will never do anything. And this bishop should be here. But it'll never stay there because you could still go rook c8 and push c4. Okay, so what does he do? Queen f6. I really would have, if I thought white had an attack here or something to be scared of, I would approve of this move. I don't think it's a bad move or as in losing or much worse or anything, but I don't see a reason to trade the queens. I think black is better. Like I prefer black's position because this bishop is much better than this bishop, right? This knight is a little bit better than this knight. I'm castled, or black's castled, white's not. This pawn is a weakness in the long term. This pawn looks like a weakness in the long term, so you can see black's better. So you could trade the queens and say black's structure is better. That's true. But I feel like knight f6 just looks natural, right? Just put your knight on that square. It's the best square. Okay, queen f6 is perfectly fine. I'm not a stickler. Any one of these developing moves, queen f6, knight f6, or rook c8, I'm not going to complain. Because this connects the rooks, it gets the last piece out, it contests white's queen, fine. White goes queen c7, which my brain didn't process, didn't even consider, because that looks weird. Okay, I guess he thinks he's being cute because he's attacking two pieces. But white's not castled. And the center of the board is like about to open. So this is weird. Hold on. So when black moved his queen to f6, the obvious thing, the surface thing, is the queen trade. But behind the surface, deeper underneath, not behind, underneath, is this diagonal. And this pawn tension. And this king. So if you put that all together, you'll see that the queen going here actually undefends this and this. And so you can take his pawn and give up a piece. Whichever piece he takes, you now take a second pawn. So now you have two pawns for whatever piece he took, and your queen's hitting the rook, and this square with check and mate. So for example, if you take the pawn, he takes a piece, you take a pawn, he takes the other piece. Well, actually the queen would be defending that square. Okay, but at the very least you can take the rook with check and then take the other rook. So that should be good enough. So yeah, c takes d. I don't understand what his move is there. I don't. Yeah, he doesn't have a move. He just because now this is just happening. I guess he has to castle, but then you get to take another pawn. So let's say we take this and he takes our piece. We take. Now he's trying to be cute and he castles, avoiding this and this. But the knight's hanging if you castle. Check. If the king goes here, this is checkmate. And if the rook takes, you take the rook. And you're up stuff. You're up an exchange and two pawns. Okay, so c takes d is the move. Let's see. Bishop c8. Okay. I mean, if you don't see c takes d, you kind of have no choice but to play this move to protect both the pieces, right? So this is an understandable move. Although, let's see how long he spent on it. 850, 841. Plus some, is this increment? I'm going to assume it's 10-second increment and say he spent 20 seconds on that. So, alright, it was an insta move. I'll take it. Bishop to b5, hitting the knight twice. I feel like the way black played this, moving the queen to f6, jumbled up his pieces, especially now that he didn't take c takes d and he moved his bishop back. These pieces are kind of jumbled. And the queen's in here, so now would be the opportunity to go, let's say queen d8, protect the knight and just trade to clear everything up and make some space. Because otherwise, you got to get these pieces out again. But instead, he defends with the rook. The thing is, this knight doesn't really have squares. Like, this is bad square. I mean, this is bad square. And if you can't move the knight, and this is your move, if white gets a rook to d1, you might be able to put too much pressure on you. Or more pressure. So I feel like this doesn't really solve it. At least the queen trade would get rid of the queen, which is huge. Now white comes in even further, attacking the rook. Again, you either have to move the rook, or you can still see that c takes d should work. So you take a pawn, right? He takes a rook. You take another pawn. And again, you're threatening everything. If he goes back, you just take the rook. And if he moves the rook or defends it somehow, check. It works. C takes d just works. But he moves the rook, and now the queen takes the pawn and relieves all pressure from the position. Well, not all, a tiny bit of pressure, but not sure that was the best move, because you're taking pawns, but you're still not developing. You're still not castled. Your rook's not in the game, and you can't castle without hanging this knight. So grabbing the pawn on the side of the board, only to realize that your queen can't come back effectively, suspicious. Not a fan. At the same time, what do you do as black? Well, I guess the answer is always going to be c takes d. But assuming that's not there, because he doesn't seem to see it, maybe... it's kind of rough, because this knight is so ugly. You want to play this just to free some space. e5. It's so weird that he plays e5 to attack the pawn, but doesn't just take the pawn. Like, even if you take and you don't see any of the weird stuff, like the rook hanging or this hanging, takes, 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 right? Like, you win a pawn. So it's weird just not to look at that move at all and just ignore the tension for the whole game. Most players can't do that, and these guys act like this isn't a thing all game. It's weird. So e5. I feel like this would be a good move, except now it blocks the diagonal, and he's just gonna play d5, and now all of your cool dynamic stuff is dead, and he shuts down all the lines with a 3-pawn mass. And these guys are just looking so bad. But he doesn't push. He doesn't push and cement the bishop. Yeah, he doesn't do this and make your life miserable. Not that it's miserable, but compared to the c takes d open lines, it's sad. So bishop takes knight. Fine, we have to take back probably. White takes the pawn in the center. I guess he saw that this was just hit so many times. But now the queen takes, and now this is an obvious threat. Also hitting this pawn, which I don't think matter. Like, I wouldn't take it. So white castles protecting the rook. Again, this pawn is hanging. Now, is it worth taking? This is a question that, if a serious player has to ask himself. You do get a pawn, which would even material, because he took this pawn here. It is going to take a tempo to do that. So the benefit is that it comes with tempo against the knight. The downside is that knight wants to move anyway and wants to go to f3, so it's not a real tempo. The good thing about taking it now, as opposed to when I said I wouldn't take it before, is that he castled, and castling removes the rook that was here. And so with no rook here, I have no problem now opening up the h-file. Before you open it, there's a hook here, his rook can sack and some crazy feature. Now that's never a thing, so now I'm much more likely to take this pawn. But I'm always looking for better moves or in-between moves that don't hurt, like tempo moves on the queen perhaps, or something like that. But now I don't really see too strong of a reason not to take the pawn unless I want to move this bishop. It's kind of awkward, and he can add pressure. So moving the bishop, not there. Like g4 controls that square and hits the pawn. And if you can't put a rook on the d file, that's really bad for him. But I don't think taking the pawn's losing. Yeah, he takes the pawn, hits the knight, but now I expect knight f3, and oh yeah, computer doesn't like it probably because bishop c6 just hits it directly. So if not knight f3, g3, that weakens the light squares even worse. Yeah, wait, what am I missing? Oh, it's, wait, queen a4 is not a move. Rook a d1. They're saying instead of knight f3, a better move is to put a rook here. And oh, it double attacks this, but how does that change anything? I'm gonna move this guy. He's gonna take. I'm gonna take. Then he has to go knight f3 anyway, doesn't he? Yeah, he's gonna end up with knight f3, but okay. Okay, so Nick plays bishop c6. That's just a lot of pressure around the king on the light squares. He wants to avoid it. Oh, what's up, Jaker and Kingman? How's it going? Sorry I missed your guys' message. Um, so he moves back away because he's trying to remove the target from the light squares. But this can't be right. Like his queen is off sides. It's nowhere near the king. That can't be good. And this knight move back. And you start to see the makings of problems. And you start getting ideas, right? If you just look at it like that. White's rooks can't help. Interesting. Oh no, it's just I always have 0 viewers, so I never looked at the chat. And since I work on one screen, I alt tab, and so I figured I wouldn't need to alt tab, so I just checked. Okay, so black goes to g6, which is a great move, threatening checkmate in one. And now it's going to be awkward for white to defend without creating more weaknesses. He goes f3 to blunt the diagonal. But now this pawn is hanging. I wanted to go rook d2 and then sack my rook, move my king. But then he gets another move, and he can. Oh no, that he can't go there because that would hang. But he can go rook f2, takes, takes, check, back. Not, I don't think that works. I could use my phone. That would require intelligence, Kingsman. But actually, that's a great idea. I'll do that after this game. So black takes the pawn, which makes a lot of sense. Now he's up 1 point of material, and as at this rating, it's important to notice that moving the f pawn from f2 to f3, if you just look at this, it looks kind of normal, no problem. But the problem with moving the f pawn is that it weakens your position horizontally. If this f pawn is here, this rook is defending the f2 square. Now, the f2 square is not a shield because the queen actually touches g2. Whereas if the pawn was here, it wouldn't touch g2. So now, if you throw a rook here, that's going to be serious problems for white. Almost unstoppable horizontal attack. And that wouldn't happen if the f-pawn was back. So that's the importance of the f-pawn that people don't usually understand. They think it's always just the diagonal to the king, like a queen check. And that is one of the weaknesses, but as the game progresses, this horizontal weakness with for heavy pieces, rooks and queens, is the real problem. So white has to move at this point. I don't even know what to do. Get your knight in the game, I guess. You gotta get your knight in the game. Okay, he moves his queen. It comes with tempo, so I don't hate it. So it's like almost getting your knight in the game. Next move is free. Unless we have some good move here. But our bishop's under attack. But now for example, we can go bishop b5, tempoing the rook, so that he can't go knight g4. So I don't like queen c7 in that case. Okay, then he can counter tempo us on our queen, but then our queen can counter tempo him, going anywhere to hit this pawn. And well, I guess he can get knight g4 to defend, but then we can go h5 and he would lose it. So queen c7, although it comes with a tempo, I think knight g4 directly would have made more sense because of bishop b5 here. So Nick decides to stay on this long diagonal, which I get because, you know, God forbid this pawn moves, it's checkmate, but this pawn's obviously not going to move. So, and not only is it not going to move, but e4 should be on white's mind to remove this weakness, create a pawn chain, and completely shut this bishop out. So I don't like it here. I much prefer out here. Also, there's no other diagonal. You know, the a file is it, then there's no more board. So there's no other diagonal for it to go on. So I don't like it in the corner. Even if you wanted to go back, I feel like bishop b7 is more clever. You know, queen can't take this because you can go here, threatening checkmate and the queen. And you still have access to this diagonal. So, but okay, I understand the mindset of, you know what, let me tuck my bishop in the corner, have long diagonal pressure all game. It'll always be protected by the rooks. I never have to worry about the piece again. So I do understand that. And white goes back to defend here. But his queen was the only thing that was actually keeping us from just jumping his position, because everything had to defend each other. So now that the queen released its pressure, we have an opportunity to jump in and eventually maybe get a rook d2, which I really wanted to get this whole game. Currently, this rook's undefended, so we have to prepare it. But all in all, I like black's position. Okay, so this pawn is weak, but assuming you attack it, he'll probably go e4. I don't know how the inclusion of that affects anything. So maybe your move's fine. Rook c8. I'm guessing you just wanted to move it away from the queen so you can infiltrate. So I like it. It also stays behind one of the passed pawns. You could probably push your pawns here, I wonder. Although I don't think you should. You might as well play with the rooks. Okay. Now knight g4. Covering this square, this pawn. And threatening knight h6. Interesting. And knight f6 if he wanted to reroute it that way. So Nick sees all this and retreats his queen as probably definitely the best move. Stopping all of these ideas and pinning the knight because the queen's undefended. It looks almost like it should be defended, but it's actually not. It's hanging. And so this, although And this is why chess is cool, because it's so much psychology and emotions. You can trick people. Like in White's mind, he's thinking, I'm attacking. I set up these cool tricks. Knight h6, knight f6. Oh, black queen g6 has. He's defending. He has to defend. And so when your mindset is in that, you don't realize that this defending is actually a huge threat. Like that doesn't crush your mind, and this move is actually a huge threat. And so that's why you have to be very careful, because h5 just wins the game for black. And it's not easy to look at when you have a narrative in your head, like, oh, this is a defending move. That's why he played this, right? You still have to look for the threat. And so here it is, prime example. e4, excellent positional move, creating this pawn chain, stopping the bishop, but just at the wrong time, because h5 just, you can't move the knight because the queen hangs. That's not it. But another good move, assuming h5 didn't exist, I do like c4 or b5, but I'm not so inclined to play with the pawns just yet. I really wanted to get in the rooks. But okay, c4. Now white probably notices the tactic. He removes his queen from the tactic, and he hits this pawn. Um, let's see. Engine doesn't hate it, but aesthetically, visually, I don't like it at all. It seems extremely counterintuitive to disconnect these rooks and throw one like that on a square that currently is defended by this pawn, but you'd like to push the pawn, which would hang the rook. Also, it's possible both players missed that this pawn is not actually hanging because the queen defends it. So it's not in need of defense, if that was one of the ideas of this move. Also, if you did want to defend it, b5 looks way more natural than rook c5, because this is not a thing, right? I don't think so. Yeah, it's super ugly. I noticed that whenever I try to get fancy with my rooks, whenever I take them off the back rank um, and disconnect them and put one in like a weird spot, that even though it might be good if you play all the perfect moves, it always lands me in trouble. So yeah, just something about this move feels wrong. 93, pressuring the pawn. Also, maybe, I don't know, trying to improve the knight. Wow, the balls on this guy. He just keeps pushing the pawn, even with two rooks, the queen blockading, the knight blockading. He says, I'm pushing. I don't care about this bishop in the corner. Who needs to improve that guy when I can push my pawns? So that's what he does. Now white says, wait a second. I'm going to challenge the rook. This makes sense. This move makes sense. Especially since if you remove this rook, you remove the back rank protection as well as this guy's protection. Queen f6 looks nice here. A very nice just harmony move. And then takes, rook over, queen anywhere, maybe. Queen c7, e7. Either way, this looks good. Just get one of the rooks off the board. Less pieces. You have a nice endgame as black. You're up a pawn, pass pawn. Just get rid of all the stuff on the board. But he gets out of the way and gives up the d file. This does put another guy here, but I don't think giving up the d file is necessary. Although it's not a big deal, I feel like. I mean, white blockades the pawn like this. I guess, I mean, it's more natural to put the knight in front, but it's going to be hard to solve his problems because if Nick ever decides to improve his bishop, he'll have something like this, and the pawn's going to go anyway. So I don't really know how to stop the pawn. Maybe that's why he goes here. I would like to develop the bishop, I mean, improve the bishop in one of these ways, or improve the queen on the dark squares. He played queen e6. Okay, it improves the queen slightly on the light squares. It's hard for me to tell how much better the dark squares would be, but okay, we'll accept the move. Knight blockades as well. This guy's super blockading the pawn. But white doesn't really have a plan. If you're just gonna sit like this guy's not going anywhere. These guys have to stay still. The queen's in defense mode, what's it gonna do by itself? White has no moves. He's almost just gonna sit there forever. So this gives black all the time he wants to do this. And any type of knight jump hitting the queen is superficial because you just move the queen. So it doesn't actually accomplish anything. Okay, now it now it accomplishes at least. I was gonna say at least you trade him out on a piece, but you don't even want to. You don't want to trade this stuff as white, so because you're losing either way. So now he hits this and this. So you move the queen. Where do you move it? Hanging, 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 hanging. Queen f6 looks good. Is queen c4 square? Possibly, I don't even know. I like queen f6 though. He doesn't take the bishop and goes rook d3, hitting the pawn twice. Bishop to b5. If you want to kind of try to force this, takes, takes. Okay, bishop a4, keeping the pieces on the board and controlling the knight. And controlling the c2 square. I like this move. Queen e1. Now this, what's the point of this move? I think he intended to create a third attacker where there's only two defenders, so it seems reasonable. Now why does the engine hate it? So the two questions you always ask yourself internally is, what's up, Smash? Is the first question you ask yourself is, what is my opponent's threat slash idea with his last move? Which, so then you say, you realize, oh, it's to win this pawn. And the second question is, what's the drawback or consequences of the last move? And the drawback or consequence is the queen no longer defends this knight. So now you have this opportunity probably to pin the knight, like rook d8, and double hit it while it's pinned. And it looks like it's hard to defend. So like if he goes back, or here, defending it a second time, maybe we can just attack it a third time, and he can't defend it a third time, right? So maybe that's the reason the computer hates this move. Rook d8 looks very strong. But Nick's like, I don't care, just c2. We're getting a queen no matter what. Even though it's blockaded, Knight's hitting it. He just does not care. I guess the upside is it was hit 3 times. If you don't see rook d8, you don't want to lose the pawn, right? So he pushes it, figuring he adds a defender, removes an attacker and another attacker, but adds an attacker. All in all, it's defended adequately now. So, okay, and it's 1 square away from promotion. I'd be so scared as white. So now he actually goes back, redefending his knight and attacking the pawn. Now the pawn is hit 3 times, but it's defended 3 times. Now if I'm black here, I just want to get some pieces off the board so I can win this winning endgame. I definitely want to get a pair of rooks because 2 rooks is scarier than 1 because they can coordinate. And so the moves I'm looking at are rook c3, right? Going for that trade, but probably still rook d8 because the knight's still pinned and you could keep adding attacker again just like last time. And he can't do anything with this rook, so probably rook d8 again. b5, what the hell does this move? I don't get it. The bishop doesn't need protection. There's no reason to open this up laterally. You're not going to push it. You just created a target. What? You undefended the rook. I hate everything about that move. I hate everything about that move. Oh my god. I feel like even if you don't see rook d8, which is kind of natural, rook c3 looks kind of natural to me. I feel like that's a move a lot of people would see. But b4, b5 just doesn't make sense to me. If this pawn wasn't here, it makes perfect sense. But as soon as you do this, what? Okay, so whatever, b5. He has a minute on this clock, so we'll accept all of his moves from now on. It's funny because white makes the most natural looking move, right? Go here and attack it a fourth time, and the bar is just like, nope. It's not having it. White's just so tied down. Like, what's his? If you give him one more a free move, what does he do? His rooks are both stuck. His pawn's stuck, king stuck. I guess he could hop the knight around for no reason at all. It doesn't do anything though. At least black, your goal is to somehow break through. You can go for this pawn. You can go for this knight. You can try for the queen. I feel like if you want to add pressure slowly. Now this pawn's actually hit a fourth time. And you are defending it 3 times. But if he takes with the rook, you obviously take with the bishop win in exchange. So he's only threatening to take with the knight. The thing is, if he takes with the knight, I think queen b2 wins because it hits the rook, pins the knight this way vertically because the rook is just toast. And then when the rook moves, you can take the knight. So this pawn's not actually hanging. And if it's not hanging, it's good to note that this move would stop this move, which looks natural, hitting the pawn. If he takes with the knight now, you don't have queen b2 because your rook blocks. I'm not sure if maybe that's good in a different way, but I don't feel like calculating, so. But you almost want to pass to white. Again, like, rook d8? Is that a move still? Yeah, it is. It's got to be the move, and then this whole time just rook d8. But he attacks the knight this way, which makes less sense. But now again, it's on a protected square. It passes the ball back into white's court and threatens rook d8 next turn, which is funny. So now we have knight f5, and this is a total collapse because queen b2 looks very strong. He's probably counting on knight e7 resource, but let's try to calculate that without moving the pieces. So queen goes to b2, hitting the rook. This rook can't defend. The queen can defend. So hypothetically, here, queen goes somewhere. There's got to be something there. Hold on, there, queen somewhere. Take things. I mean, I guess you still don't rush with anything. It's just a good move. And then you can take this pawn and stop the knight's jumps on. Actually, it doesn't stop this jump because it's defended. This rook is in both of the attacks, so you can move the rook to here and let him give you a check. What's the best move here? Queen takes a3 or king a7, and then he goes here, and you don't care. b4. b4. He takes the rook, and you just take back and push. That's so awesome. Okay, so he goes knight f5. You did go here. And as I suspected, his best defense is queen e1, but I'm going to turn the lines off. Wait, what does he do? Why'd the game stop? Oh. He decides he's no longer defending his stuff. And he abandons his army with 30 seconds on his clock and goes queen g3. That doesn't even threaten checkmate because the queen defends. But he's hoping that, black has 20 seconds on his clock, so anything can happen. He wants black to take with check. The king's going to move. And then he wants to checkmate black, but does it work? Check. Move. Various ways of preventing checkmate. You can move the queen back to the long diagonal. Defending, you can probably go g6 and let him take with check. But most gangster of all, he's giving this check, letting him take your queen, queening with check. He moves his king, and then you go queen c3, defending the diagonal and hitting the rook. Unnecessary, but cool. Anyway, Nick takes the rook with check. He calls this guy's bluff with 20 seconds on his clock. Now this guy's threatening mate in 1. Again, we can go to the long diagonal. He plays g6, but now I suspect knight h6 is coming. And now the most natural move is king g7, but the thing is it stays in the pin and allows knight f5, so King f8 allows queen d6. King h8 allows queen e5. King h7 allows... You get one move out of king h7 because there's no real immediate check without sacking your queen. So he can try to set up a checkmate on the next turn or something, but you'll have at least one move. So black goes king g7, which has to allow for some type of perpetual. So knight f5, and then again, if you go back to king g8, it's the same thing. If you go to f8, probably has like this, which looks horrible. Maybe he even has checkmate over here. So this probably allows for perpetual. Knight f5, king f8. This looks dangerous for black here. This looks dangerous, like queen somewhere, and then this is actually checkmate. Although you would take the knight, but then you get perpetual at the very least, probably. So what happens? He gives this check on d6. King moves to only square because this would land with checkmate. What? No, that's not it. White has to perpetual him to keep the draw. Oh my god. Is this a move? Threatening mate. Take the knight. Check. Here. 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 You gotta have perpetual there just by sacking the knight. Wow. But instead he goes knight e7. Trying to win some material, but that's not good. Because you're down so much. Your rook's hanging. Your knight will be hanging. King goes here. Which walks into more checks. So maybe h7 would have been smarter. And now he takes the rook. He needed to still go for perpetual stuff with checks and sacking the knight and perpetual. But instead he takes the rook, equalizing material for a second. But your knight's on c8. And you have so many tactical issues here. This queen can go to the long diagonal, protecting everything, and then you just get a queen. Also, black could take your knight. And he's up a piece and a much better position. Also, black could take your rook. And when you take, he gets a queen anyway. And he's up a rook. So this position is just, you needed to go to perpetual. You need to understand the danger you're in. No amount of material gain would work. You need to perpetual. So Nick finds the sack, the queen sack. Very nice. Gets a queen. And this guy played a couple more moves. Maybe he's going for some tricks. But after check, 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 and mate, you know, the queen can block, but whatever, mate. That was a really good game. Really hard fought game. No big blunders. I mean, a few tactical oversights. The only one I would say that actually matter, they all matter, obviously. Like, hold on. I'd say for, you know, if you want to get to 1700 and beyond, let's see. So all of this is fine. This is all really good stuff. Inaccuracies here and there, but whatever. Again, in all these lines, knowing that b5, just seeing this concept that he can't take the pawn and you can use it to bully the bishop later on. Yeah, after the knight moves, then it can't trade. So like here, this is like a 1500 and up move. You know, you should be able to find this. Knight to f6. It just looks super obvious. Here again, b5, 1700 and up move, because you're so used to this pattern from Puzzle Rush and just from common knowledge. Um, this I feel like that's not really like a high rated move. It's kind of, I mean, it is in some regards, but it's also fairly obvious in that this is like not, it's not a closed center, so this is kind of obvious, I feel like. And I get it, you have two pieces hanging, you don't consider it, fine. This was all nicely done. And then I would just say here, this is like a level 1 tactic, you know, like a 1000, 1200 level tactic. This, like the b5 was kind of tricky, clever, but this is kind of obvious. You don't really want to be missing these ones at 1700, let's say. And then whatever, she had some weird moves, but it was a really good game overall. Pretty impressed with that game. And thanks for the submission, Nicholas. I hope you get value from that.